Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. I hope everyone is doing well despite the circumstances and managing to stay safe. I'm very glad that you could join me. My name is Rebecca Yates, and this is my presentation called Relearning the Snake. I completed this under Miss Jasara Norton for UWF's Kugelman Honors Program through one of their seminars called The Nature of Writing. The task of this project was to identify some aspect of nature and to examine the way that people have interacted with that piece of nature over time. And I chose to examine the snake, being that they are such a seriously and continuously misunderstood and underrepresented animal, especially in Western cultures. And I saw this as a unique opportunity to put some attention on this and possibly diminish some of the fear or the hatred or the disgust that so many people tend to hold towards snakes. So my presentation here is about the kind of relationship that we, as in mankind, have had with snakes in the past, the kind of relationship that we currently have, how the nature of these relationships can physically impact snake populations, and how we could go forward with this information and lean towards a more peaceful coexistence with these animals. Now, I will be talking about each of these sections in greater detail over the subsequent slides, but if you would like to read through this, by all means do so. I'll give you a few seconds so you can pause if needed. Now, snakes have been here a very long time, a lot longer than we have. There's debate, of course, but the current approximations state that snakes arose around 90 to 100 million years ago. To put it in perspective, anatomically modern humans have only been here about 200,000. Lots of animals have been here since we have, but it might come as a surprise that snakes are one of the only animals to found their way into every major culture. I mean, it's really astounding how much of an influence they have had on a variety of religions, on art, mythology, music, literature, other things of cultural significance too. In some early civilizations, including ancient India and Africa, snakes were considered creators of the universe, almost like a god figure, something bigger than them that was to be feared and respected. Indigenous people of North America and ancient Egypt considered snakes to be symbols of fertility and life. And one of the most significant and oldest mythologies is Ouroboros, roughly translated into the one who devours itself. You'll see that there in figure A. It's a very significant symbol. I mean, it's spanned millennia, and it represents renewal and infinite regeneration. Ancient Mesopotamians and Semites used this. They believed snakes to be immortal because they could shed their skin continuously and appear youthful. Plato even wrote about Ouroboros, stemming from ideas of infinite creation and destruction, saying that the snake represents a sort of self-contained and self-sustained system that could be applied to describe life on Earth in general. I mean, the list is endless on how snakes have been depicted between cultures, but just as there has been variation between, there is also variation within. North America is a great example of this. As I mentioned, indigenous peoples regarded snakes as symbols of fertility and immortality, and they were just highly respected animals. Naturally, this country started adopting more European perceptions of snakes whenever immigrants began to make their way over here. In one sense, when we look at the birth of the United States, the snake was an incredibly influential animal, politically speaking. Snakes popped up in tons of propaganda, some of which are still very recognizable, including the famous Join or Die cartoon by Benjamin Franklin, there in figure B, which really sought to unite the colonies during the American Revolutionary War. Don't Tread on Me, it's another famous symbol, comes from a historical flag that was flown on a warship while fighting for American independence from the British rule. As you'll see it there in figure C, it shows a rattlesnake coiled up and just ready to strike at any minute above that "Don't tread on me" expression. This symbol is still very heavily used in politics today. It pops up a lot, especially in Southern cultures. Obviously, it doesn't represent American independence anymore, but it still embodies a lot of those values that were very important at the time. We also have the official seal of the Army that depicts a snake above the words, "This will defend," and I have that there in figure D. These few examples I just mentioned were some of the most important symbols for the early United States. The snakes represented a lot of values that were crucial at the time, including unity and dignity, honor, courage, prevalence. These were all values that birthed the American spirit, and naturally, the snake became an iconic symbol for North American culture. However, at the same time, early North America was also met with heavy religious movements, especially that from the Puritans. John Smith, one of the first to explore New England, saw America as its own Garden of Eden and an opportunity to do innocent work like Adam and Eve did. Because of what was simultaneously happening with illness and warfare, religious dissemination, varieties of commerce, all of these new ways of life that were being adopted in the new American culture, the Puritan ideals did not really align with these early political happenings. The values were very different, the ideas of living were very different, and naturally the snake kind of found its way into this. Where the snake represented dignity, honor, and perseverance in terms of early politics and societal systems in the North America, the snake represented the wrongdoings of mankind, the work of the devil, and even the devil himself to the Puritans. The Second Great Awakening was also a big religious movement in the United States that kind of reinstilled some of these same symbolist depictions of the snake as being evil through these Christianity beliefs. Much of Judeo-Christianism displays this, mainly because of the infamous serpent story of Adam and Eve. These religious depictions really characterized snakes and gave them humanistic qualities that you and I both know that they don't actually have, but these feelings and characteristics are still heavily associated with these animals. So far, though, we can see that there were numerous cultural, political, and religious depictions of snakes that occurred simultaneously and interactively that shaped the early American perception of the snake. Looking at modern perceptions of snakes in America, we can observe the human-snake relationship in several ways. I broke it down here into two categories, the societal level and the individual level. Starting with the societal level, snakes still have an influence in our cultures through our interactions, media, events, and things of that nature. One of the first that I have up here is to be called a snake. For people my age, it's something that gets tossed around quite a bit, but to be called a snake means to be deemed untrustworthy or not loyal, someone who has little morality or just a cunning manner. But ultimately, they encompass negative qualities, and to be called a snake is not a positive thing. Snakes also appear frequently in modern horror and mythology movies. They usually represent something to be feared. There are a lot of examples of this, but probably one of the biggest of these exists in the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling, an extremely popular and influential book and movie series during the past 20 years that has a lot of evil depictions that coincide with snakes. There are also things like rattlesnake roundups, usually annual events that happen more so in the Midwestern and Southern United States, where people capture wild rattlesnakes and sell them or display them, and they're just killed for food and products. It's a tradition of championing these animals that most people tend to shy away from. Also tried very hard to look for positive depictions of snakes, but there was quite a lack of these outside of organizations that were committed to snake conservation. Research has allowed us some insight on the individual relationship people have with snakes as well, but unfortunately it doesn't appear to be positive either. Psychometric research predicts that around half of the population feels anxious about snakes. Snakes are very common for reported top fears, and I'm sure that some of you who are listening could probably agree. I wanted to note that I found contradicting research on whether the fear of snakes is innate or not, which I find both fascinating and important. Most research I came across say that it is a conditioned or learned fear, and that lots of people heavily fear snakes without ever having an interaction with them, suggesting that they fear them only because other people fear them. This is important because it suggests that the fear of snakes could be influenced by our societies, and just as easily as snakes are continuously represented with negative associations, they could begin to be associated with positive ones instead. So why do our perceptions matter? Why am I making such a big deal about how we feel about snakes? Well, currently, snake populations are at a worldwide decline. 11 out of 17 snake populations in Europe have declined sharply in a very short amount of time, and the same goes for certain species in North America. A recent study done by Michigan State University, this year actually, 2 months ago, studied a protected area in El Cope, Panama, where an invasive fungal pathogen wiped out a ton of the area's frogs. As we know, messing with one part of the food chain severely messes with another, and unfortunately, the loss of the snake species is just tremendous in this area right now. There are instances of these kind of things happening anywhere and everywhere snakes exist, and while there are highly adaptable species whose populations are withstanding, most are suffering at the hands of habitat loss from human expansion and loss of prey, climate change, pollution, and other hazards to the environments these animals live in, as well as the animals themselves. I know that none of you are going to gasp at any of this, because loss of habitats and the animals within them are becoming more and more of a frequent conversation. The reason why I'm such an advocate for snakes in particular, though, is because very few people are. I believe that because of the intense fears and disgust that people have with snakes, there is a very unfortunate lack of movement to protect these animals. Even within the IUCN, there's a lack of data even on snake populations. The status of a large majority of snake populations in general are unknown, and it is safe to assume they are worse than your best guess. There are several organizations in place dedicated to snake conservation and education, one of them being a nonprofit called Save the Snakes, who works worldwide to face the dilemma of human-snake relationships. They make it very important to note that besides all of the environmental pressures that threaten snakes, one of the biggest is how people even approach snakes. With so many people fearing them, it is common for snakes to be senselessly killed and exploited, and there's hardly any motivation present to help these animals. So, taking away from all of this, what can we do as a society to combat this, and what can you do as an individual? The individual solution I propose is relatively simple. Evaluate where you stand with snakes. If you hate them, ask yourself why. Have you ever interacted with a snake? Has one ever showed you any aggression the way that they are so often depicted to be? The majority of you will probably say no. Try to see the good that they do. Snakes are wonderful for the environment. They are superb animals and have been evolving to be so for millions of years. They're an incredible part of the ecosystem and food chain. Most of us would probably see more rats in our homes if they weren't there to be our natural pest exterminators. Most are passive, but it is important to know which ones to steer clear from. But if you come across one, walk away. Leave it alone and it will do the same. By understanding the snake more, maybe one more's life will be spared and maybe your fear will begin to diminish. Above all, snakes are an animal we share this earth with, and they deserve our respect for that alone. At the societal level, it would be influential to see more positive depictions of snakes in our media and culture for a number of reasons. Firstly, to help diminish that fear we were just talking about, but also because humanities has a large hand in science as well. The high amounts of anxiety and fear also drive how much motivation there is to even study these animals, much less protect them. The humanities are a large part of why these animals are disappearing, but they could be the very thing that saves them. I think I will end this on a quote by Christoph Mach from his book Slow Hope. It reads, "If human manipulation of the earth has been a destructive force that has caused huge converging threats, we can also imagine that human endeavors can help us build a less destructive world in the centuries to come." I think that is a very optimistic way to approach the future as we battle more and more environmental issues. To remember that there is still a chance that human endeavors can reverse what they've already done. I hope that my presentation will have some of you walk away from this and make the effort to relearn the snake. Thank you. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to email me at rpy1@students.uwf.edu. Thank you.